Well, as you can see from the sign, I've come for a wheezy wander around Cockglode and Rotary Woods, which lie at the side, the western end actually, of Sherwood Heath. And in a geographical context, can be found between the villages of Edwinstowe and New Ollerton. Now, it's a former colliery spoil heap, or part of it. So for someone like myself, it's a struggle. Now, for someone who suffers with emphysema like myself, this is foreboding. It's also very difficult. I've not come up much of an incline, and yet, of course, with being a sufferer of emphysema, I'm already out of breath. So you may ask, why go up there then? Well, I do it because any form of exercise does you good. You may not think it, and indeed I certainly won't think it by the time I'm near that seat up there. However, there is something nice to see on the way, and a sign of spring that I've showed you before. Here we go. Well, I've made it as far as this seat, and the reason that I'm doing this is I want to warn people of the dangers of smoking. I could say don't do it, but you're probably already doing it, and I dare say that, like myself, you're already saying, I'll worry about the effects of smoking in later life. But the truth is that once the effects of smoking start to hit you, and you realise that maybe smoking is not what it's cracked out to be. Yes, you might have been fine when you were younger, but by the time the effects start to hit you and you realise it, the damage is done. And that was something that affected myself personally, and Dillis as well. We both knew we had to stop smoking, especially myself. The effects of smoking on me 5-6 years ago were incredibly great. Dillis was showing no signs. And yet within 6 months of packing up smoking, the results of smoking, a lifetime of smoking, became evident in the diagnosis of lung cancer. At the time, it was suggested or believed that the cancer had been there for 2 years, certainly up to 2 years. It was slow growing, and it was only found by chance. My emphysema was diagnosed a month or so after Dillis passing. But when we used to be recording glowworms regularly in 2015, 2017, I was the one that was walking around Clipston Old Quarter wheezing and getting out of breath. Dillis wasn't so bad. I regret smoking now. I regret it a lot. Now, this bit of woodland was heavily planted. It was planted as whips a good number of years ago. I can remember it being planted, and it's got to be the top side of 20 years since it was planted. It's now in need of thinning, as so often many newly planted sites are after 10-20 years. Sometimes I think we'd be better off using a third of the trees that we do, or the whips that we do when planting former pit tops. I'd rather see trees planted sparsely than too dense. Creates work in the long run. But we're heading along this little stretch here. It does curl around to the left and then starts to go uphill again. Now I've got my breath back. In a few minutes' time I'll have lost it. And that is the highest point here. Now you can see the effects of what smoking will do to you, and you'll be able to hear the effects of what smoking will eventually do to you in 10-20 years' time. You may think you're invincible now because you're young, but you've got this to come. And if I were you, I'd do something about it while you're young and fit and well enough to do something about it. I do a lot of walking, and the reason I do a lot of walking is not just to accumulate records and to find invertebrates. I do it because walking helps me. It helps my lungs. At the time, it doesn't always seem like it. But if I stopped exercising, things would deteriorate. So I have to keep doing it. After a bit of respite and rest, I've managed to wheeze my way up to the top of Rotary Wood here. There's a couple of picnic benches that you can sit on, and I did. It's well worth the walk and the breathlessness to get up here though for me, because of this chap. This of course is hazel, adorned with hazel catkins, and these are appearing now in hedgerows throughout the county from what I've seen driving around recently. And hazel's very much the first stage of spring for me, each stage being marked by a different plant. Hazel is the one from January, typically quite often nowadays from as early as Christmas, and these will be adorning hazel bushes throughout the month. Come late January and February, the second stage, or the second plant, is snowdrop, our first flowering bulb. That and winter aconite, but winter aconite's rarely planted, so it's not very often you'll come across that. But snowdrop and the snowdrop flowering period is my second stage in the run up to spring. Next, stage 3, surprisingly enough, is daffodils, and of course I'll have to include crocus. I do love crocus. And daffodils, narcissi and crocus will take us from the end of February right through March and well into April. Of course, the flowering times of all these depends on what kind of winter or early spring period we get. The next stage, which is often sort of late March and early April, is hawthorn. Now, it's been a traditional family thing for as long as I can remember, is to collect and eat a handful of hawthorn leaves when the first ones that you see bursting out. They really are nice, not at all like you'd imagine, perfectly harmless. We always used to call them bread and cheese for some reason. Maybe that was just a Lamley thing, I don't know. And of course the final aspect or stage of spring, no spring would be complete without the bluebells, the flowering of bluebells. And I'd also include pink campion in that. And the two together are an absolute joy in any English woodland. So here we are, stage 1. beautiful. Well, as the sun starts its slow descent towards the horizon, it's still sort of early afternoon, and I'm working my way back. Thankfully, it's downhill. But I wanted to give you some idea of the effects of smoking and emphysema, living with emphysema. Shortens your life. Once you've got it, you've got it. There's no going back. You can slow the process down, and that's the point, or one of the points of me getting out and about. It's important both ways, getting out and about. It's important physically in terms of my lungs, and mentally in terms of my mental well-being, which is the popular phrase at the moment. Getting out has always been important to myself, and it was to Dillis when Dillis was alive, and as long as we could get out for at least half an hour or a quick walk a day, that was as good as a holiday. And if you can get or have access to woodlands for a walk, woodlands are the most mentally therapeutic places on the planet. The trees listen and don't tell. Something you can't say regarding people. And these trees here are only young. Not all will survive to an old age. Some will be thinned to allow others the space to develop and grow. Being outside in the countryside and in Nottinghamshire's woodlands gives me the place to grow mentally. And it can anybody